Okay, so this is going to be our part 2 video. We just got done talking about pedigrees and kind of understanding how we can assign genotypes and paying attention to how these traits are inherited. So down here, just to kind of recap, it says the 4 modes of inheritance are. So what we talked about was we had said it could be dominant and on an autosome. So we'll call that autosomal dominant. We said it could be dominant but on the X chromosome. So we could say sex-linked dominant or we could say X-linked dominant. Doesn't really matter. They both kind of mean the same thing. And then we're going to use the same chromosome terms, but instead of dominant we would say recessive. So we could have a trait that is autosomal recessive or X-linked recessive. So those are the 4 modes of inheritance. Now, as I had mentioned previously, there's a pretty good chance that you'll have a pedigree type of question on the biology state test for Ohio. It's not that they're there every year, and sometimes there's 2 questions, sometimes there's no questions. But for the most part, it's a pretty important concept in biology, and obviously you can, involve a lot of concepts by asking the question. So it is pretty common for there to be a pedigree question. What we're going to do next is kind of like a step above a question that would be asked on the state test. What I am going to ask of you is I want you to be able to go up to a pedigree and study it and tell me which of these patterns is being reflected in that pedigree. Now I will tell you, I'm going to show you how to do it. I'm going to give you some questions that you can ask yourself to figure it out. But I've never seen a question like this on the state test. But if you can do that, if you can figure out the mode of inheritance, then you can figure out any other question that the test would ask you. So that's kind of why I teach it like that. I'm teaching it at a slightly higher level with the idea that if you can do this, then you can do anything with the pedigrees. Okay, so let me show you these questions. If you go up to a pedigree and you ask yourself these questions in this order, just to make it easy for yourself, you're going to be able to figure out what type of pedigree it is. Now, there are some cases where they just don't give you enough information, especially when we get into dominant pedigrees. Those are really tough. And so you might have to say, I don't know if it's autosomal or sex-linked, but I do know that it's a dominant trait. Okay. All right. So this should be the first question that you ask yourself. Does the pedigree have carriers? If you answer yes to that question, so you see some circles with dots in it, you see some squares that are half shaded in, it doesn't matter if it's male or female. If there are carriers, then you know it has to be recessive. Okay. So if we answer yes to that question, then we're going to go on to question number 2. Does it only have female carriers? If you're only seeing the circles with the dots or half shaded in, then chances are it is going to be X-linked. Remember, we can also say sex-linked recessive, because we cannot have male carriers if it's associated with the X chromosome. Let's say you answer no to this one. So it has carriers, but no, they're not just female carriers. Look at the next question. There are both male and female carriers. Then we know it's not X-linked. We know it is autosomal. Okay, those are the easy ones, I'll be honest. So let's say you look at this question and the answer is no. Okay, so then we're going to go to question 4 immediately. You don't need to go to questions 2 and 3. So if you answer no, what that's really going to tell you is that you are looking at a dominant pedigree. The pedigree is going to involve a dominant characteristic. Our next step is figuring out, is this sex-linked dominant or is it autosomal dominant? So here's what we're going to look at. So, does the father pass it on to his son? Now, there's kind of like some asterisks with this. So father passes it on to his son, but in the same situation, the mom cannot have it. Only the dad has it. And 1, 2 sons, doesn't matter how many, but at least one of their sons has it, meaning the son is inheriting it from the dad and not the mom. If the son inherits it from the dad, it has to be autosomal. Oops, excuse me. Okay, sorry, I moved my camera there a little bit. And then the next question is kind of like the opposite of that. So if a dad has it and passes it on to only his daughters, meaning the daughters get it from the dad and not from the mom because the mom does not have it and none of the sons have it. So I know that there's a lot of things here. But if a father is passing it on to the daughter, then it has to be X-linked. Remember, this is also called sex-linked. Oops. Dominant. So as I mentioned earlier, the dominant ones are kind of difficult to identify because you do have to look for little mini families within the pedigree. Usually a pedigree is going to show you maybe 3 generations, maybe 4 generations of family members, but you're just trying to look for one little tiny family in there, like a mom and a dad and their kids, and see if you can apply these scenarios. If you can't figure it out, if you know it's dominant because there's no carriers, but you really can't find a situation that fits this, then that's fine. Just say, I know it's dominant, I'm just not sure which one. So what you're going to do now is you're going to look at all of these pedigrees, and you're going to ask yourself those questions and then figure out which of these categories is being reflected in the pedigree. So if we're doing this in the classroom, these are set up around the room. If we're doing it online, these are actually linked on Schoology, and you can just click on those numbers and the pedigree will pop up.